Tonight, if the heat becomes unbearable, most of us reach for a switch. Cool air fills the room in seconds. We barely think about it. But for most of human history, that switch didn't exist. There was no hum of a fan, no rush of cold air, no escape from a room that felt like an oven long after the sun had gone down. So what did people actually do on the hottest nights of the year when sleep felt almost impossible? The answer is more clever and more surprising than you might expect. A problem as old as civilization itself. Heat has always been one of the great enemies of a good night's sleep. Long before thermometers could tell people exactly how hot it was, they could feel it in their skin. The damp sheets, the sweat that never quite dried, the sense that the air itself had grown heavy and impossible to escape. And this wasn't a minor inconvenience. In the wrong conditions, extreme heat could be dangerous, even deadly, which meant that staying cool at night wasn't just about comfort. It was, quite literally, about survival. Across centuries and continents, people responded with ingenuity. They studied the wind, they studied stone, they studied the rhythms of their own bodies. And slowly, one clever idea at a time, they built an entire culture around beating the heat. How they did it. Let's start with something surprisingly simple: where people chose to sleep. In many hot climates, the bedroom was often the worst possible place to be at night. Even hours after sunset, stone and brick walls still radiated the heat they had soaked up all day. Touch them with your hand, and they would still feel warm, as if the house itself refused to let go of the sun. So people went outside. Across the Middle East and South Asia, families carried mats and thin cots up to flat rooftops, sleeping together under the open sky. Somewhere below, dogs barked. Someone laughed in a distant alley. A baby cried, then went quiet again. The city never fully slept, but up on the roof, away from the trapped heat of the rooms below, the air was finally breathable. And as the night wore on, it could even turn cool. Some homes were built with a special feature just for this: a screened-in sleeping porch designed purely for hot weather rest. It became so popular that by the early 20th century, even the White House had one, built on the roof for President William Howard Taft in 1910. But sleeping outdoors came with its own cruel joke. Imagine finally drifting off, exhausted from the heat of the day, only to wake an hour later covered in mosquito bites, the insects finding you long before real sleep ever could. And if there was no porch, no garden, no rooftop to escape to, in crowded cities like New York, people found somewhere else entirely. On brutal summer nights, hundreds of residents climbed out through their windows onto iron fire escapes, laying blankets across the metal grates, trusting nothing more than a few rusted railings between themselves and the streets far below. But perhaps the strangest solution of all came from the desert. In Persia, modern-day Iran, engineers built towers that seemed to breathe. These tall, chimney-like structures, called bodgirs, rose from rooftops to catch even the faintest breeze, pulling it down into the rooms below. Step beneath one on a burning afternoon, and the air itself would seem to change, cooler, softer, almost alive, sometimes carrying the faint scent of damp clay from the water reservoirs hidden below. In the desert city of Yazd, some of these towers still stand today, and studies suggest they could lower indoor temperatures by around 10 degrees Celsius without a single moving part and without a drop of electricity. And these same wind towers hid an even greater secret beneath them: massive domed chambers called yakchals, used the cool air pulled down by the towers to store something almost unbelievable in a desert: ice. Blocks harvested from nearby mountains in the depths of winter were kept frozen through the brutal heat of summer, giving households cold water and occasionally, on the very worst nights, a small breath of relief for the air of a room. But engineering wasn't the only solution. Sometimes the answer was another human being. In colonial India, wealthy households employed a servant known as a punkawala, whose entire job was to sit through the night pulling a rope, swinging a large cloth fan back and forth above sleeping families. The same exhausting system later appeared in the American South, where enslaved people were forced to perform this same repetitive labor so others could rest in comfort. For everyone else, the body itself became the battlefield. In parts of East Asia, sleepers used a hollow, woven bamboo cylinder, sometimes called a bamboo wife, draped over one leg while lying on their side. The idea was simple: keep your limbs from touching each other, since skin against skin only trapped more heat. And in dry regions with almost no humidity at all, people turned to water itself. Curtains woven from fragrant twigs were hung across windows and doorways, then soaked with water at dusk. As the water slowly evaporated through the night, it pulled the heat out of the air, filling the room with a faint, earthy coolness that needed no electricity at all. The cost of the heat. But for all this ingenuity, none of it was equal. For the wealthy, summer was uncomfortable. For the poor, it could become unbearable. The rich could build wind towers, owned fans of carved ivory and silk, or hire someone else to do the exhausting work of moving the air through the night. Everyone else simply had to endure it, with no porch, no rooftop, no servant, and no relief. Night after night, summer after summer. Heat, it turns out, has never fallen evenly on everyone. It settles hardest on those with the least power to escape it. A truth that, in many ways, hasn't changed nearly as much as we might like to think. What made it work? And yet, without any modern science, people had already discovered its basic rules. They understood that moving air feels cooler than still air, even at the exact same temperature, which is why they built towers to chase it and fans to create it. They understood evaporation centuries before anyone could explain the chemistry behind it, which is the very same principle, just built with cloth and water, that powers many air conditioners today. They understood timing, too. In southern Spain, and once across much of the American South, entire communities rested through the punishing heat of early afternoon, then returned to life once evening brought relief. This is the origin of what much of the world still knows today as the siesta. None of this knowledge arrived overnight. It was passed down, tested, and refined across generations. Quiet engineering, perfected long before anyone called it science. What this tells us: it's easy to look back at these methods and see only their limitations. But maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. The people who slept on rooftops, who caught the wind in towers of stone, who timed their entire day around the sun, they weren't primitive. They were paying extremely close attention to their world and answering it with remarkable precision. What feels unbearable to us today was simply life to them, something to be studied, planned around, and endured with a quiet resilience we rarely need to summon anymore. A final thought. Every time a fan begins to spin, it quietly reminds us that for thousands of years, human beings had nothing but their own ingenuity and the hope that tonight the wind might come. If you had to choose only one way to survive a brutal summer night, sleeping on an open rooftop, resting on a screened porch, or standing beneath a tower built to catch the wind, which would you choose? Tell us in the comments, and if you enjoyed stepping into the past with us today, consider subscribing to How They Lived, where we uncover what everyday life was really like, one story at a time.